Welcome to the Revenue Marketing Report brought to you by Caliber Mind. I'm your host, Kamala Thompson, and today I'm joined by one of our own, one of the brilliant minds behind Caliber Mind, Nick Zangri. Nick, tell us a little bit about your experience.
Yeah, thanks, Kamala. Excited to be on the podcast today. So I have about 20 years of expertise in marketing operations. Started at a company called Fast Search. It was acquired by Microsoft, so I got to see the startup, compared to the enterprise, and then did for 6 or 7 years, implemented Marketo and Eloqua Salesforce environments, ran marketing operations teams, demand gen teams, and more recently helped found Caliber Mind, solving the world's toughest attribution problems in B2B marketing, and excited to dive into the topic.
Yeah, and attribution is just inherently tough, and we're going to talk about that a little bit today. This is part of our DIY attribution series. You can get more content on our blog at calibermind.com. We've done some webinars and LinkedIn Live events, so I encourage people to check that out. So as part of this series, and I'm excited to talk about this with you because I think it's one of the most important aspects of any project, all of us kind of have a picture in our heads when we hear the word multi-touch attribution. Kind of think we know what it is. And when we're given a project, it's really tempting to just start going out and checking out the technology to make sure it can do what we think it does, or start kind of building it in our minds. Why is it so critical for people to slow down and ask why people want it?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think the few projects that I'm involved with that do actually fail are ones where people don't know why they're buying what they're buying, and there's not a true understanding on the motivation. So to your point, they're just, I think I need an attribution solution. A lot of my peers have attribution solutions at other companies. So I'm just immediately going to look and research vendors, without really knowing what problems am I hoping to solve, or what efficiencies am I hoping to add? What am I hoping to measure to help my CMO? So those are questions you all have to have baked before you go in earnest and evaluate build versus buy, I think.
Yeah, it's interesting. I like how you call out that if it's just the next thing we think we should do, maybe we shouldn't do it yet and ask some more questions.
Yeah, I've got involved where, we want to prove ROI, and we'll implement the thing, and then they'll realize that they've put no effort into documenting cost data for any of their campaigns or initiatives. So how do you know what's your return on your investment if you haven't documented what's your investment? That's just a small example, but you have to think of what are all the inputs into what I'm trying to get out, and think through the inputs first before you're get a successful output.
Yeah, and I know we've both heard, I spend a lot of money on digital advertising, but I don't use Salesforce campaigns or UTM parameters.
Yeah.
Oh, it's going to make it a little bit harder.
It's true. Go ahead. No, I was gonna say, and not to say that working with a company like Caliber Mind, you're not going to get hand-holding and best practices and professional services. So if you do end up going with a vendor, definitely check out the team that's going to be implementing these things, because chances are you've forgotten or you didn't know some prerequisites before embarking on an attribution journey. So picking a team is important.
So to get people's wheels turning a little bit, what are some really great reasons, or just examples of reasons, companies look for attribution?
Yeah, oftentimes there's a catalyst that begins the search, whether it's could be looking at some of the tougher challenges. We have to make cutbacks on our marketing budget. What are we going to cut? What's actually moving the needle? If we had to choose between several channels, and picking, maybe our marketing budget went from 100% to 50%, something like that. It's good to be able to cut the channels that are the underperformers. So there's an initiative like that. Or on the contrary, maybe a company is doing really well and they just got a new round of funding, and we're looking to add channels and diversify our marketing portfolio. So then you want to really have the infrastructure to report on it, so you can rapidly experiment and adapt and reallocate things so you're not so married to year-long programs. You can stay more agile. I've worked with companies where they have a large annual trade show, in the 8 figures sometimes. And then if that's the case, then you're going to want to really justify that revenue, what sessions work best, what audiences you invited to last year's event performed. And so when planning a big event like that, sometimes that's a catalyst for needing multi-touch attribution. Or if you just get tired of going into the board meetings and your meetings with your CFO and not being able to defend marketing's contribution to revenue. So there's that breaking point where it's like, hey, I need something. I have to figure out how to tie my efforts to revenue.
Yeah, there's so many reasons and none of them are wrong. I think the point of this is just to really dig into that to figure out what you need to focus the most on. I hear a lot of people coming to us because they're tired of single touch attribution and they know that it doesn't really demonstrate reality because they have a long sales cycle with lots of people involved, or the ROI piece that you spoke about with the trade show. And then that first use case was just like clean campaign optimization. What are we doing that works best and how do we double down on it? How do each of those reasons change how we think about implementing attribution? Does it change what touch points we're including or how we're including them?
Yeah, I think the fundamentals are consistent regardless of what you're trying to measure. However, obviously an offline channel has a different process for capturing than a digital channel, versus a first-party channel versus a third-party channel. So how you capture data on your website is different than capturing data on a third-party site or a content syndication play, obviously. However, all the components are pretty similar. So you have people in your database, leads and contacts, and you want to start building a timeline for each of those people, regardless of what the channel or platform is. And that timeline, an easy way to do it or common way to do it is using campaign members in Salesforce. And that's kind of, I'd say, table stakes, where if I have I sponsor a trade show and I get my attendee list, and I know of the people that actually stop by my booth at my trade show, then I want a way to mark the date that all those people came to the trade show and what campaign is associated with that trade show. So that's what campaign members do. And then the more sophisticated your channels get, and you might have a chat on your website, and they're coming from a paid ad that has UTMs in the URL parameters. They're driving to yours. So then there's more moving parts. There's setting a cookie when they land on the site, a first-party cookie. And there's registering the cookie when they chat in their email address. And then finally, it'll still go into a campaign member at the end, but there's more steps to get it into the campaign member versus the simplified list import of booth attendees. But I think the blocking and tackling is similar at the end of the day.
Yeah, I think where I've seen some variability is, some folks, when they think attribution, they think of capturing every single marketing touch point, particularly the digital ones. And then some people are thinking about it as a department representation of the effort that goes into closing a deal. And sometimes in those cases, I've seen people apply a higher bar and kind of bring in like an intent level almost, where they only want to include certain interactions that sales does. Let's say we're going to exclude emails after the opportunity is created because it's mostly scheduling and contract negotiation. So I've seen that impact the data model a little bit. Are there other things? Ooh, another good one. Fire groups, like hospitals.
Yeah.
Are there other instances like that where you've seen interesting little caveats to how we look at the data?
Yeah, the buyer group thing is super interesting because I'll explain what that is. Essentially, you have, or Forrester came out with it, where we're not just no longer selling to accounts. You look at an account that might have 10,000 employees that we want to sell into. We're actually selling within a team of decision makers or a committee within that group. So if I believe that premise, and then I must also want to be able to measure my engagement in that buying group and touch points within that buying group. So then that introduces a whole other level of hygiene and setup. So you don't have everybody with this email domain is going to get attribution. That's a very generous model, and you could get false positives if you're selling a multi-product or you're selling to multiple teams within an organization. So then what some of our customers have done, or what I've seen, is either by flagging, either having a custom object or a multi-select, some way where on the contact you can associate which products of interest would be relevant to them. You can automate some of that based off of what topics they viewed on your website. Almost like, we had lead scoring back more than 10 years ago now. And now we're doing more advanced topical scoring. So think of even within an existing account, you want to cross-sell into a division, and they own product A. Customer marketing is all the rage right now. And you want to know, who should I sell product B to? And a good way of doing that is to build lead scoring specific around product B. So now I'm able to start to identify these other committees of people that are interested in this product, these other groups. So yeah, I mean, as far as your original question around things we've seen and challenges in the data setup, when you look at not for profits, is certainly a fun one. You think schools, and you have school districts that they share the same email domain across different schools, and then those roll up to a district, and the district could have an administration. So we've worked with some pretty gnarly account, like you said, hospital administration, benefits. Partner attribution is another really tricky one.
Mm-hmm.
If you are a company that sells through a value-added reseller often, you may have a large percentage of your revenue coming from marketing that you're not even doing. And so those partners may give you lists of leads every month. And now it's not just what campaign was done, it's how much money do we give to the partner? It's what do our CRM accounts match with the deals that they're registering. So there's a hygiene process too.
So in
Generate partner attribution.
So in requirements gathering, we're not only figuring out what questions are really the questions they're trying to answer would drive a lot of what you're talking about.
It can drive it. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, if we're working with, let me just off the top of my head, think of an industry like, say, HR benefits. If I'm I sell software that does benefits, what I'm ultimately trying to measure is how many employees at my customers are using my product. And then that's going to drive how much I'm paid.
Mm-hmm.
So then the question could be, I want to drive employee growth at my companies where they have my software. Okay, so that's a very specific business question. But to do that, now I need, all right, what are all the parts? Well, first of all, I need to know how many employees are using it over time at a I need to know what content they're exposing through training and portals, in-app, what have you. So yeah, sometimes the business question informs the inputs, or usually does.
And would you agree that it could also inform which model you'd recommend?
For sure. Yeah. I mean, I don't think one attribution model is perfect for every business question. So if you really need to generate more top of funnel pipeline, and maybe you're looking at a first touch model to start out. I need more people engaged in what channels and campaigns are really good at getting that first touch, getting that awareness, driving the initial MQL or the lead capture. Or maybe I have a lot of top of funnel leads, but I'm having an issue getting them to an opportunity. Maybe I want to look at a middle touch model then, and I'm trying to assess what's going to convert those known people to What's the thing that gets them to the opportunity in that conversion? And then, even weighted is a nice Switzerland model. So sometimes you just want to say, let's treat all channels equally, and we just want to know the order of events, what's the combination and mix that successful customers are taking. Even weighted could be good for that. Or if you have so much data and too many campaigns to sift through, maybe you want to do something more complex like machine learning or a chain-based model. So yeah, I think the state of your data and the sophistication of your team and the business question all could lead to, using different attribution models for sure.
So I like that you brought up machine learning because that's where I was going to go next.
All the rage these days.
I know. I use it all the time as a marketer in many different ways. What are, I hear a lot of people try machine learning and then call it a black box. What are some times that machine learning may not be the ideal answer? And then let's talk about when it does fit really well.
Okay, so it's really well on lots of data, and let me caveat that with saying expertly labeled data, a lot of expertly labeled data. So when you are back to the original best practice around setting up campaigns, if you have 300 campaign types and hundreds of lead sources, and you're gonna not be able to group the data in meaningful buckets because there'll be 2 in this bucket, 3 in this bucket instead of 200 in this bucket. So the machine has sometimes trouble drawing generalizations. So yeah, if you have sparse data or poorly labeled data, then you're probably not ready for machine learning. Or if you don't trust your data, there's definitely a data trust component. Then how are you going to trust a black box? It's going to spit out incorrect predictions because they're based on, poor data, garbage in, garbage out. So that's definitely some examples where I don't recommend machine learning if you don't have the fundamentals right. You're going to overcommit and no one's going to get it. So even when we roll out machine learning, we sometimes start with some of the simpler models to gain that trust and build that progression in a crawl, walk, run. Where you might be a good candidate for machine learning attribution is one, if you've had maybe attribution built in Salesforce or a more basic version of it, and you've bought into it, your company has adopted the attribution and they the concept of revenue marketing and performance marketing. Once that's all bought in and adopted, and folks are data driven, but then you start to reach a ceiling with your capabilities in your current provider or current infrastructure. It's not built for big data and machine learning. So Salesforce was, even though they have products like Einstein, it all happens outside of Salesforce. Data that's in Salesforce it's a relational database. It's not designed for big data. And so when you start to think of what's next, what's outside of the CRM, maybe your company has purchased Snowflake or another data warehouse, they're starting to think holistically about data. Then it may be, and you're already using some form of attribution, then it's probably a good signal that you could be ready for machine learning.
I like the process you are walking through because I feel, in my experience anyway, it's just as much about explaining things in a way that makes sense and getting buy-in as it is about how advanced we get. So if we're not comfortable with something and we don't understand it, we might be more apt to throw it out. Mm-hmm. So it's really important to gauge your organization's maturity level and how easy this is going to be to explain.
Yeah, and you mentioned an interesting use case of sales touches earlier as well. So the buy-in might not just be on the marketing team. This could be buy-in from other stakeholders and other organizations. You're going to want data buy-in from your IT team. If you're going to get this data in some warehouse and connect up Tableau to it or your BI tool, that's buy-in over there. So we got the CRO and the revenue team getting buy-in, marketing getting buy-in, finance getting buy-in, and IT getting buy-in. So it's a lot of boxes to check. Sometimes those other teams have many other priorities. They're super busy. So I have seen another successful approach is doing a small pilot within your department and using that to get the buy-in. Say, look, we built this basic version. This is conceptually what we want to do. Does this hold water?
It's like we shared an agenda or something, because that's a perfect segue into
I think just working together this long, yeah, we just kind of
right.
read each other's sentences.
Yeah. I was thinking back to the original use cases why people want attribution, and one of them is proving ROI or marketing's contribution to pipeline and bookings.
Mm-hmm.
And I love what you said about a lot of times it takes more than one department to get buy-in. So it's okay if you're working in your department to pilot something. Mm-hmm. But if you're trying to put something in front of the board, or if you're trying to defend budget with finance and you independently construct something without their input, why don't we involve those stakeholders more in these projects? I guess I would ask.
Yeah, it's I mean, the really, really successful ones, they are involved. There's a lot of committees, a lot of stakeholders at these large cross-functional projects at big enterprises. But yeah, I think part of it is because, attribution could also have not a negative connotation, but more like a negative stereotype is a good way of saying it. And that it's, first of all, it's marketing trying to take credit for everything. It's assigning pointing fingers, and it could be very contentious, saying that, oh no, we were the reason this big customer closed, not you. You didn't do anything. So I think to have those conversations and maybe to help make some inroads into those other departments, it's important to not oversell attribution and sell it as directional. It's not a perfect model. There's definitely other things. The more departments you include as campaigns in your model, the more holistic it will be. But even if you just start with marketing channels, you have $1 million opportunity. Maybe that I like to use this example because this actually happened. There was a $1 million opportunity, and the marketing team had done a very poor job of helping with this deal, or at least marking in the system that they helped on this deal. There were no campaign responses, no events, no paper trail that this ever existed, except one email was clicked on. And so you have this attribution model saying this email generated $1 million, right? But you have to be able to explain, okay, we didn't have these processes and we didn't have all the touch points in place. And directionally, this could be a great email, but we're not saying that sales didn't do anything. It could have been this, the salesperson's brother on the golf course, and that's why they signed the deal. So then put a referral campaign in there as well, if those are actually the things that are happening. So anyway, it's important to caveat it in that it's directional. It's by design imperfect. Every model is telling a different, solving a different question. And so I think that having a little humility when going into those teams and not saying like, I'm going to show you where all your deals come from, and marketing is trying to take all this credit. That's not what it's about. It's that we're working as a team to try to generate more pipeline and customers, trying to understand how we can work synergistically across the teams and do more of what's working. I think that's a good way of phrasing it.
Those are all excellent points. And I feel like those people who hate attribution need to take a step back and ask themselves, is it because it's failed me in the past, or is it because we tried to roll it out in a silo and it got shot down and then it left bad feelings? Because I think a lot of people fall into that bucket. I'm just a sneaking suspicion.
And that's with any vendor. You try not, I think if you're marketing ops, mistake I've made in the past is like, you go all around, you do a whole road show internally to buy this vendor and you stake your whole reputation on it and then it falls on its face. And I bet a lot of them that's happened,
Yeah.
And that's how you learn is that the vendor might not have been wrong. It just could have been the implementation, the politics. Maybe there were other reasons, bad data, et cetera. So think more objectively and say, I want to see it at the revenue table. Attribution is the best bet I have as a marketer to prove ROI of what I'm doing. So you might not love it, but what are the alternatives?
Yeah, it's a fantastic tool. Nick, thank you so much for being on the podcast. Where can people find you online to network?
Yeah, hope to do more. And feel free to connect up. I love talking about this stuff and geeking out. So thanks for the invite, Kimmel.
Is LinkedIn the best place to find you? Are there any communities you're active in?
Yes, LinkedIn. I am in all the, RevOps Slack channels as well, but LinkedIn's probably best.
Great. So thank you to our listeners. If you like the show, please rate, review, subscribe, tell 2 friends. It does make a difference. And for more great content like this, check out calgramite.com.